Supreme Court with a number of important decisions today that were released. This one's on affirmative action. So before, when they were considering the case of Fisher versus University of Texas, it didn't look good. There were more Supreme Court justices obviously on the right side than the left side, and Antonin Scalia, Justice Roberts, had all spoken out, making it very clear their intention to make sure they ruled against affirmative action. And this is a case of Abigail Fisher down in Texas. Let me just set that up for you real quick so you know what the context is. In Texas, they have a program called the Top 10% Rule. It's race neutral. Now, that's how they admit 75% of the students. So they say if you're in the top percent of your high school, we're going to admit you into state schools across Texas. Now, that is the great majority of the people that come in. That's race neutral. That's not the issue. But for 25% that don't make it in through that program, well, they consider a number of factors. Obviously, student scores, GPAs, extracurricular activities, but they do consider race as one of those factors because the argument goes some racial groups have been greatly disadvantaged throughout history, and that has resulted in a great number of setbacks for them. If they can overcome those setbacks and still have really good grades and good test scores, that gives you an indication that they're going to do even better in the future. That is among the rationale for affirmative action. Well, Abigail Fisher didn't like that. Now, one way she could have avoided that is by finishing in the top 10%, which she didn't in her high school. But afterwards, they said, oh, no, the minorities took my spot. And by the way, she should be enormously careful with what she asked for and the rest with the other white parents and students that complain. In any state where they have gotten rid of affirmative action, whites have not done better. They have gotten into the schools a lot less. Why? Because Asians wound up taking most of the spots. Now, I don't say that against them. It's wonderful. And by the way, you might be surprised by this, but I'm against affirmative action. I wasn't against affirmative action when it first started. It was needed, and it was needed for a long time because that's what people do. Everything was a good old boys club. You know, even whatever you do is I know Bob, or maybe I know Sally, but I'm going to help the people I know, whether that's for a job, that's for college admission, etc. That's why you need to break that cycle. What I'm worried about now is that it stigmatizes minorities. Oh, that's the only reason they got it. Now, in reality, so for example, in Texas, 75% of the students got in because they were in the top 10% of their high school. But every time they see a minority, they go, oh, that's the only reason they got in, and they try to dismiss them. I don't think that that's helpful in the long run. That is not the reason why the Supreme Court justices on the right wing were against affirmative action. They were against it for a different reason. In fact, let me quote Antonin Scalia for you. He said, there are those who contend that it does not benefit African Americans to get them into the University of Texas, where they do not do well, as opposed to having them go to a less advanced school, a slower track school where they do well. So my concern is when they do well, they don't get credit for it. Scalia's concern was, come on, they're black. Of course they're not going to do well. They have them go to a lesser school, separate but equal. No, I see. Now, as you all know, Scalia passed away, so he didn't get to rule on this. So that was a dramatic twist, obviously. And then we had a second dramatic twist. Justice Anthony Kennedy, who was a conservative, switched sides and voted with the liberals. Now, that was enormously important because one of the liberal justices, Alana Kagan, couldn't vote. She had to recuse herself because she was in the Obama administration arguing for these same affirmative action programs. So since she has a conflict of interest there, she was not allowed to vote. But with the Kennedy switchover and with Scalia passing away, 4-3, affirmative action wins anyway. So it remains the law of the land, at least in Texas. And again, different states have different policies. And I said earlier, in some of those states, when they changed the rules, who predominantly benefited were Asians. That is literal, and you could look it up. And so, and again, I don't view that to be a bad thing. I think that's wonderful. They worked hard, and so they reaped those fruits. Now, I want a diverse student body, and I also want the kids who are working hardest, et cetera. So it is not an easy issue in my mind. But for the people who are pressing these cases, who almost are all white, they think, oh man, if I just got rid of the minorities, it'd be a big advantage for me. That's just not proven to be the case when you take away affirmative action. Okay, now one last thing. If you like affirmative action and you think, okay, that's it, this is going to be the rule everywhere. Again, it's not the case in every state. And Kennedy did have this warning. He said, the court's affirmance of the university's admission policy today does not necessarily mean the university may rely on that same policy without refinement. It is the university's ongoing obligation to engage in constant deliberation and continued reflection regarding its admissions policies. And that's a little bit of a warning to, hey, we're not going to necessarily have affirmative action forever, and I'm not telling you your program in the case of Texas is perfect. You should continue to refine it. But I largely agree with that. I don't think affirmative action should be forever, and there is a good and honest debate as to when we should end it. I don't know if anybody says, hey, look, if 200 years from now we still haven't gotten to racial equality, that would be devastating. I hope that's not the case. I hope we get somewhere near that. I totally understand that we're not as close as we want to be, but at some point, affirmative action will become counterproductive. I'm worried that that point has arrived today. Others say, no, it might come later, but, and as you can tell, people are against affirmative action for different reasons. I want to help minorities. Scalia seems like he was not in that camp. He was in the camp of, come on, the minorities aren't going to do well. Let's get real, right? I don't agree with that camp at all. But today, no matter which camp you're on, the Supreme Court has ruled and affirmative action continues in Texas.